Fireline ready. The command echoed through the Nevada desert, sharp and final. Heat rippled over the sand, distorting the world into waves of gold and white. 100 soldiers stood in formation behind the barrier, their boots sinking slightly into the dust. The sun hit their helmets like fire. At the far end of the range, 3 steel targets shimmered in the distance, almost invisible through the mirage. 1,500 meters away. Triple exposure. No margin for error. The SEAL commander stepped forward, his uniform dark against the pale horizon. He lifted his binoculars and spoke into the comm, voice clipped and cold. Targets confirmed. Crosswind 22 knots variable. Range mirage active. Triple steel formation. Center, left, right. This one's for the record. Around him the officers watched with folded arms. They had seen hundreds of shooters tested here. None had ever cleared this range. Someone muttered under his breath, "No one could hit that shot." Another chuckled, "Not in this wind." The commander didn't answer. He just said, "We'll see." Then, from the back of the line, a figure moved forward. Lieutenant Kara Miles, slim build, tan fatigues, sleeves rolled tight. She carried her rifle with the ease of habit, not pride. No swagger, no speech, just silence. The chatter faded when they saw her take position. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. She lay prone on the sand, aligning her rifle with practiced precision. Her cheek rested against the stock. The glass of her scope caught a sliver of sunlight, flickering like a signal. The commander glanced at her paperwork on the nearby clipboard. His tone dropped. "She's the Marine transfer?" An officer nodded. "Dismissed 2 years ago. Behavioral noncompliance." The commander frowned. "And now she wants to prove herself to the SEALs." He looked back downrange, then at her calm, expressionless face. "This should be interesting." "Lieutenant," he called out, voice booming across the field. 3 targets. 3 rounds. 1 minute. If you even clip one, I'll call you a miracle." Kara's response was quiet, almost lost in the wind. "Understood, sir." She checked her scope once more. Adjusted windage. 2 clicks left. Her fingers brushed the trigger guard, not ready to fire, just feeling it, memorizing its resistance. The faint buzz of cicadas filled the silence. A bird cut across the sky, black against the white glare. The digital timer beeped. 60 seconds. The commander watched her through the binoculars. Her body didn't move. She was stone. Only the slow rhythm of her breath betrayed life. At 40 seconds, a gust of wind twisted the range flags into chaos. The officers exchanged knowing glances. Impossible conditions, but Kara didn't flinch. She saw the pattern beneath the storm, the rhythm of the flags, the invisible pulse of air bending across the sand. She adjusted again. 1 more click, 30 seconds, scope zeroed, she whispered. Target 1 acquired. The trigger broke cleanly. The rifle's report cracked across the desert, rolling into silence. Half a second later, clang. First target down, no reaction from her. No movement. Only the next adjustment, 20 seconds. Target 2, breath out. Pressure steady, crack, clang, another hit. The officers froze. The commander lowered his binoculars slightly. 15 seconds. The wind roared now, dragging plumes of dust across the field. The third target blurred behind the heat mirage, flickering like it was alive. She blinked once, refocused. The world shrank into the circle of her scope. Target 3. The commander watched her finger tighten. Smooth, patient, perfect. Crack. Silence stretched. Even the wind paused, waiting. Then it clanged 3 hits. 3 targets. 3 seconds apart. The timer still had 10 seconds left when she lifted her head from the scope. The corporal beside her swallowed hard, whispering, all 3 confirmed. The range was utterly still. A single casing rolled across the sand and stopped at her elbow. The commander's expression didn't change immediately. He walked toward her slowly, boots crunching in the silence. Every eye followed him. When he stopped beside her, he looked down the range again, as if needing to see it for himself. 3 steel plates swaying gently in the heat, each marked with a fresh impact dead center. He lowered the binoculars, voice low. If she even clips one, I'll call her a miracle. He turned toward his officers. Well, he said, looks like the miracle works weekends. A faint smile ghosted across his face. Not approval, not yet, just recognition. Kara stood, brushing sand from her knees. Her face remained calm, detached. She didn't salute. She didn't speak. She simply cleared her weapon, slung it over her shoulder, and walked past the silent crowd. No music, no applause, only the wind returning to its song. The commander watched her go, the faint smell of gunpowder still clinging to the air. He finally said to no one in particular, "Get her file. I want to know who trained her." And as the range officers scrambled to check their scopes, Lieutenant Kara Miles disappeared into the heat haze, a lone figure walking across the sand, leaving behind 3 perfect shots and 100 unanswered questions. The legend began there, under that merciless sun with 3 targets, 1 name, and a desert that remembered every sound. The wind rose again, dry and restless, dragging the desert back into motion. Fine grains of sand whispered against steel barrels and scuffed boots. The scent of gun oil clung to the air, sharp, metallic, and unforgiving. "Range reset," a voice shouted. The echo carried across the flats, bouncing off the dunes until it faded into nothing. Kara Miles knelt beside her rifle, eyes still on the far horizon. Each shimmered across the firing line, warping the air like ripples in glass. The targets had been repainted, bright white now against a sea of pale gold. They almost looked alive, flickering through the mirage. She adjusted the lens cover, cleaning a faint trace of dust from the scope. Her fingers were steady, but her thoughts weren't. The murmurs had started again. 3 hits. No way she saw the flags that fast. Must have been a calibration fluke. She doesn't belong here anyway. SEAL evaluations are no place for a Marine. Kara didn't look up. She didn't need to. The tone of disbelief was one she had learned to recognize years ago. The sound of men searching for reasons to disprove what they'd just witnessed. A shadow crossed over her. The SEAL commander stood there, watching her reload with silent curiosity. He said nothing, just studied the way she handled her weapon. Smooth, economical, no wasted motion. Then, in the same quiet tone he used on every range, he said, "Lieutenant Miles, the line's yours again." She nodded once, lying prone on the sand, letting the rifle settle into position. This time no one laughed. No one spoke. They just watched. The Nevada sun pressed down harder, burning against her neck. The wind toyed with the flags again, playing its invisible game of deception. Each gust came from a slightly different angle. The air itself was the enemy here. Kara closed her eyes for a moment. The chatter of the world faded, replaced by the memory of another range, another test. A younger version of herself, standing in front of instructors who didn't think she'd last a week. "You're patient," her father had said once, his voice warm but distant. "Patience makes precision. Remember that." She opened her eyes. The world narrowed back to the desert, the rifle, the line of unseen tension between her breath and the trigger. Someone behind her whispered, "Watch her miss this time." The commander's voice cut through the heat. "Hold your comments, gentlemen. Let her work." The silence that followed was heavier than the wind. Her scope image danced slightly, the heat waves bending everything in rhythm with the air currents. She adjusted the parallax, turned the focus ring until the target stood still in her glass. Each movement was deliberate, rehearsed. The rifle was more than a weapon. It was conversation, every adjustment a sentence, every click an act of trust between shooter and steel. "Flag variance at 40, she murmured. "Elevation shift, 2 clicks up." Her spotter this time was a junior officer assigned to record telemetry. He looked nervous, not sure if he should respond. "Winds steadying from the southeast," he said finally. She didn't answer. Her mind was already elsewhere, deep inside that fragile stillness between chaos and control. From the observation platform, one of the instructors whispered to another, "She's reading the air better than anyone I've seen in years." The other replied, "Doesn't matter. One success doesn't make her one of us." Kara could feel their eyes on her. She could feel their doubts, sharp as the heat biting through her gloves. But doubt was fuel. Doubt meant they were watching, and she needed them to watch. A gust of wind swept across the range, slamming the flagpoles hard enough to make them hum. The sound echoed like a challenge. She exhaled slowly, tracing the target's edges with her sight. The reticle drifted slightly, then centered again. Before the next shot, a voice, half joking, half admiring, called out from behind the barricade. "Before we continue, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. You won't believe what's coming next." Even the commander cracked a faint grin at that, but Kara didn't smile. Her focus stayed locked down range, her breathing steadied, long and measured. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Every inhale timed to the wind's rhythm. Through the scope, she saw the sun glint off the distant steel. The light refracted for a moment, making the target almost vanish. That was fine. She didn't need to see it. She just needed to feel where it was. "Wind steady," she whispered. Scope zeroed. Her finger moved toward the trigger. Behind her, even the cicadas went silent. The commander lowered his binoculars, eyes narrowing. He knew the look, that eerie calm, the kind only a few shooters ever found. The seconds stretched, slow and heavy. Kara's lungs emptied in one long, perfect exhale. Her heartbeat slowed until it matched the whisper of sand moving beneath her chest. The rifle settled, weightless in her hands. Then, nothing. The pause before the storm. The breath before the shot that would rewrite everything they thought they knew about her. The world had gone still. Not a word, not a breath. Only the restless hum of the desert waiting for proof. Kara's cheek pressed against the stock, her heartbeat echoing faintly through the rifle frame. Her right eye stayed fixed on the target, her left on the shimmer of wind playing over the flags. Every breath was a calculation, every second a lifetime of decision. The commander's voice came low through the comm. "Shoot her when ready." She didn't answer. She simply became the moment. Through the scope, the target blurred and refocused. The air twisted with the rising heat, creating invisible rivers of turbulence. She saw them, the unseen currents, the deception of distance. Her finger settled gently on the trigger. The break was clean, crack. The rifle's recoil rippled through her body, controlled, perfect. The casing spun into the dust. Through the scope, the bullet's journey became a silent arc of faith, slicing through wind, cutting through the mirage, threading the invisible. At 1,500 meters, time moved differently. The sound of the shot reached the line long before the bullet found its mark. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then clang, a spark of light on distant steel. The first target shuddered once, then stilled. Impact confirmed, the spotter whispered, voice cracking slightly. The commander didn't blink. He just lowered his binoculars an inch and whispered to himself, "Impossible." Kara had already chambered the second round. The rifle slid smoothly under her hand, the bolt clicking forward with surgical precision. Wind shifted, a sharp left-to-right cross that sent dust rolling in a new direction. She adjusted, 2 clicks into the drift, half a breath longer on the trigger. The officers leaned closer to the monitors. Someone muttered, "No one could hit 2." She exhaled. Crack, the sound cut across the range like thunder chasing light. Seconds stretched. The air trembled. Then clang. The second target folded back, dead center hit. Now the line was silent. No whispers, no muttering. Just the desert and the echo of precision. Kara didn't smile, didn't look up. Her eyes stayed behind the scope, her breathing steady. She saw movement through the shimmer, the faint forms of the range officers reacting, turning, whispering into headsets. But none of that mattered. There was still one target left. Wind shifted again, unpredictable, swirling. The kind of crosswind that made even veteran snipers curse. Her hair whipped across her face, but her hands didn't move. She tilted her scope just slightly, accounting for the new pattern. Her lips parted in a slow whisper only the rifle could hear. Right edge, half-mil hold. Crack. The bullet tore through the heat. The air hissed like something alive. This one took longer. Half a second more than the others, just enough for tension to build like a held breath. Then, clang. 3 hits. 3 perfect impacts. The sound rolled back to the line like a distant drumbeat carried by the desert wind. The corporal beside her froze. His clipboard slipped from his hand, landing softly in the sand. He turned to the commander, wide-eyed. All three confirmed. Dead center. Sir, I saw, the commander said quietly. Around them the officers stood motionless. A few exchanged silent glances, others simply stared downrange, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Kara stayed where she was, cheek still against the rifle, eyes steady through the glass. The world inside her scope hadn't changed. The targets were still, smoke trailing faintly off their edges from impact. She blinked once, adjusted her safety, cleared the chamber. Then she sat up. The sound of metal cooling and sand shifting filled the silence. No applause, no exhale of celebration, only disbelief. The commander took a step forward, binoculars lowering slowly to his chest. He studied her the way a man studies a storm he didn't see coming. How long to confirm telemetry? He asked the range technician. Already done, sir. She hit all three in under 15 seconds. Wind variance recorded at full. 15 seconds, he repeated softly. 3 targets. He looked down at Kara. You ever done that before? She wiped a faint line of sweat from her temple. Every shot is the first one, sir. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Faint, cautious, but real. The other officers weren't ready to believe yet. One leaned toward the commander, whispering, "There's no way. Maybe the sensors misread the hits." The commander shook his head. "Those weren't sensors. I saw the dust plume. She hit clean through the center each time." Kara began to disassemble her rifle piece by piece, bolt, magazine, sling. Her movements were silent, methodical. It was ritual. As she packed her gear, the desert wind returned, swirling loose sand around her like smoke. The sound of her brass casings being collected was the only rhythm in the stillness. Far down range, the sunlight caught the edge of the third target. 3 perfect holes cut through steel like symbols of defiance. A young recruit whispered, "She dropped them in seconds," another corrected softly. 3 generals, one after another. The commander's jaw tightened. "Remember what you just saw," he said. "Oh, you won't see it again." Kara slung her rifle over her shoulder. Her expression didn't change. Her steps left shallow imprints in the sand, soon erased by the wind. Behind her, the men were still whispering, still trying to explain it away, but explanations were for those who hadn't seen it through the glass, hadn't felt the quiet between heartbeat and trigger, hadn't heard that final clang echo across the desert. As she disappeared toward the barracks line, the commander watched her go. No one spoke. Even the wind stopped to listen. The desert range emptied slowly, but the silence stayed behind. Men walked in clusters, their voices low, glancing over their shoulders as if afraid she might still be watching. No one spoke directly to Kara, not even the ones who had doubted her the loudest. She sat alone at the edge of the equipment table, wiping down her rifle with careful precision. The metal still held traces of heat from the shots. Each stroke of the cloth was slow, deliberate, like a ritual to quiet the noise outside her head. From the command tent, voices carried, sharp, clipped, uncertain. She couldn't have seen the drift that fast, one officer argued. 3 confirmed hits, another countered. "It's in the telemetry. No error margin." "Still," the first voice insisted, "it doesn't add up. Nobody reads wind like that." Inside, the SEAL commander stood at the head of the table, still in his range vest. His jaw was set, the kind of stillness that came from confusion wrapped in control. "Pull her file," he ordered. A technician slid a tablet across the table, the glow lighting the faces around him. The commander scrolled in silence, line after line, rank, deployment, commendations. Then a pause. His brows lowered slightly. "Marine Corps," he said. "Scout Sniper Division." A few heads turned. "She was discharged 2 years ago." "For what reason?" asked Major Rennick, the logistics officer. The commander's voice was quiet, but it carried. "Disciplinary non-compliance." No one spoke. He set the tablet down. The wind rattled the tent wall softly, filling the silence. "What kind of non-compliance?" someone asked. The commander read further. "Refusal to follow a direct command during a classified operation. Mission success confirmed, but..." She went off protocol. "Meaning?" She saved civilians outside her assigned perimeter, the commander said flatly. Rennick gave a dry laugh. That'll do it. Marines don't take kindly to improvisers. The commander looked at him. Improvisers don't usually hit at 1,500 meters through crosswind. He turned to the corporal. Bring her in. Outside, Kara was reassembling her rifle when the call came. She stood immediately, brushing dust from her fatigues. Her face gave nothing away. Inside the command tent, the air felt thicker. The officers straightened when she entered. She gave a crisp nod. Sir, the commander studied her for a long moment before speaking. Lieutenant Miles, correct? Yes, sir. That was one hell of a shot. 3, sir, she corrected softly. The corner of his mouth twitched, but he didn't smile. 3, right? He stepped closer, holding up the tablet. Marine Scout Sniper. 4 deployments. Commendations for precision and conduct. But disciplinary dismissal? Kara's eyes stayed forward. That's correct. You refused an order. Yes, sir. He tilted his head. Want to tell me why? She took a slow breath, but didn't lift her eyes. The order was to clear a block that had already been evacuated. I chose to cover the civilians moving toward the next street. A child was caught in the crossfire. And she lived, Kara said simply. The commander's expression didn't change, but something in the tent shifted. The kind of silence that meant everyone was listening harder than they wanted to. He nodded once. The Corps doesn't like heroes acting without permission. Kara's voice stayed calm. I wasn't trying to be a hero, sir. I was trying to finish the mission without collateral. The commander studied her face for another long moment. And now you're here. Proving range, evaluation unit. Yes, sir. He turned away, pacing slowly toward the table. You know what they're saying out there? I imagine something between luck and accident, sir. Pretty much. He stopped, looking back at her. I don't believe in luck. She said nothing. He walked closer, lowering his voice just enough that only she could hear. I've seen good shooters. I've seen gifted shooters. But what you did, that wasn't reaction time. That was instinct. Calculation on the edge of human ability. I don't like unexplained things in my command. Her eyes finally lifted to his. Understood, sir. So here's what's going to happen. He gestured to the officers behind him. You're being reassigned to Advanced Evaluation Group Bravo. 3 days of tests. Endurance, precision, tactical scenario, Rennick spoke up. That's the team that breaks even Tier 1 candidates, sir. That's the point, the commander said. If she's what I think she is, she'll make it through. If she's not, we'll know soon enough. Kara nodded once. Understood. He studied her a final time, then gave a short nod to dismiss her. She turned sharply, stepping out into the light. Outside, the heat hit her like a wall. The range was empty now, only the faint echo of footsteps and the distant clang of cooling metal. She walked past the targets without looking back. For a moment, her reflection flickered faintly on the steel plates, ghost-like under the sunlight. 3 holes. 3 statements of proof. She let her hand brush the sling of her rifle as she passed. Her pulse was steady, but somewhere beneath it was a quiet unease. Validation always came with a cost. Behind her, the officers were still murmuring, voices that drifted like heat mirages through the air. Who trained her? What kind of math is that? 1,500 meters. But the commander stood apart, arms folded, watching her fade toward the barracks. She's not done, he said under his breath. Not by a long shot. And in that silence, the wind carried only 2 things, respect and the faint hum of suspicion. For Kara Miles, it was the beginning of another test she never asked for. A test not to prove her aim, but to prove her worth. The desert waited again, and so did the ghosts of every order she'd ever refused. The Nevada sky turned copper before it went dark, bleeding light across the sand like a slow farewell. The range was quiet now. Only the faint hum of generators and the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel carried through the air. Inside the barracks, the atmosphere had shifted. Not celebratory, not hostile, just uneasy. Conversations stopped when Kara passed. Heads tilted, whispers followed. Lucky shot. 3 lucky shots. Still luck. The words weren't meant for her ears, but she heard every one. Soldiers always thought whispers could hide envy. They couldn't. She kept her pace steady, eyes forward, boots clicking softly on the metal walkway. Her bunk sat in the far corner, away from the others. She preferred it that way. The room smelled of oil, dust, and the faint trace of gunpowder that clung to uniforms like memory. She sat down, unbuckled her rifle case, and laid out her weapon piece by piece. The rifle gleamed under the low light, a machine built for precision, yet human in how it depended on patience. Her cloth moved over the barrel, slow and deliberate. Each motion calmed her breathing. It was ritual, like monks polishing silence. Outside, someone laughed too loudly, forcing ease into tension. She ignored it. Her reflection in the polished bolt caught her eye. Not the face of a hero, not even the face of a soldier chasing rank. Just a tired woman holding her breath against the noise of judgment. Lucky shot. The words echoed again. She set the bolt down carefully, hands still. Luck had never followed her. Discipline had. Obsession had. The hours behind scopes, breathing in sand and regret, that's what had brought her here. But she didn't say that out loud. The ones who doubted her wouldn't understand. They believed only what could be measured, what could be seen. She lifted the barrel to the light, checking the bore for dust. The soft glow reflected in her eyes, and suddenly the room faded, replaced by a memory that smelled of pine and rain, a wooden porch in Montana. She was 12. Her father, a tall man with hands worn by time and service, sat beside her. His old M40 sniper rifle lay across his lap, the wood polished, the metal dark with age. He was teaching her how to breathe. "Precision," he said, eyes fixed on the distant tin cans lined along the fence, "isn't about pulling the trigger. It's about waiting for the world to stop moving." She had frowned, squinting through the old scope. "How do you know when it stops?" He smiled slightly. "When you do." He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Patience is what separates aim from guess. You rush the shot, you waste it. You wait for it, you own it." The memory ended with a single crack echoing through the trees, the can falling, rolling softly in the grass. The barracks lights flickered. The fan above hummed lazily. Kara rested her chin on her hands, the rifle laid out like a puzzle of her own making. Her father's words had followed her into every mission, every breath behind a trigger. Precision is patience. He died in uniform, heart failure, not battle, but the discipline he'd given her was still alive. She exhaled slowly, the sound nearly lost under the hum of the room. Respect, that was all she wanted. Not medals, not stories, not to be remembered as the woman who made the impossible shot. Just respect, the quiet kind, the kind that didn't need to be spoken. But respect in the military was earned twice over if you were a woman, once for the rank, and once for surviving the eyes that doubted you. She began reassembling the rifle, sliding each piece into place with smooth precision. Metal clicked softly, a mechanical heartbeat in the still air. The laughter outside had stopped now. Only distant sounds of live fire drills carried from the range, muffled, rhythmic, like ghosts practicing old wars. Each gunshot echoed faintly through the desert night, one after another. Then silence. She closed her rifle case and rested her hand on top for a moment. The steel was cool beneath her palm. Her reflection stared back faintly in the brushed metal. Calm, unreadable, resolved. She whispered the old phrase under her breath. The one her father used to say whenever the world demanded proof. Precision is patience. Then she turned off the light. Outside, the desert wind carried the smell of gunpowder and something older. Memory, maybe. Or the promise of another test waiting with the dawn. The range would wake soon enough. The doubts would too. But for now, in the stillness of the barracks, Lieutenant Kara Miles sat alone with her rifle and her ghosts, the only company she trusted. And somewhere beyond the darkness, the sound of distant gunfire faded like a heartbeat disappearing into the sand. The sun hadn't yet risen, but the range was already alive with motion. Floodlights cast long shadows across the training compound, and the air buzzed with the faint hum of generators and radio chatter. The test had been scheduled for day 300, a time chosen not for convenience, but to strip comfort from the equation. Lieutenant Kara Miles stood in formation, her breath visible in the cold desert air. The SEAL commander paced before the small group, 4 recruits handpicked for the test. None of them spoke to her. "This isn't marksmanship," the commander said, his voice cutting through the dark. "This is coordination under pressure. You move as a team, you survive as a team. The mission is simple. Infiltrate the mock compound, neutralize all targets, and exfil in under 20 minutes. He stopped in front of Kara, eyes level with hers. "Your lead." A ripple went through the team, the kind of unease that doesn't need words. One of the men, Corporal Finch, scoffed quietly. "With respect, sir, we don't even know her call-outs." "You'll learn fast," the commander said. His tone wasn't a suggestion. He handed Kara the mission file, a small black folder sealed in plastic. "You'll find details inside. No live ammo, but you'll feel the hits. The sensors are tuned to pain." "Yes, sir," Kara said, her voice calm. "Your timer starts the moment your boots cross the wire." The commander stepped back, folding his arms. "Show me why I shouldn't call that first shot luck." Kara gave a single nod. "Understood, sir." In the prep tent, the glow of red lights cast every shadow long and uncertain. The team suited up in silence, the air filled with the sounds of Velcro buckles and suppressed sighs. Kara checked her rifle, loading blanks into the magazine with steady hands. Every click echoed softly in the dark. Finch muttered under his breath. "He can't believe Command stuck us with a Marine cast-off." Private Hall smirked. "Maybe she'll hit 3 lucky shots for us, too." Kara didn't respond. She adjusted her night vision goggles, the green lens reflecting her calm eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was even. "You don't have to like me. You just have to keep up." Finch looked up, half amused, half offended. "We'll see if you can lead like you shoot." She stared back. "If I can't, you'll know it before I do." The tent went quiet. At 300 sharp, they moved out. The desert was colder now. Silence broken only by the faint crunch of boots on sand. The compound loomed ahead, low concrete walls, scattered lights, and simulated guards moving under red strobes. Kara raised her fist, signaling halt. Her pulse was steady, but her thoughts weren't. Prove it again. Always again. She crouched behind a sand berm, unrolling the mission map under the faint green glow of her NVG lens. 2 hostiles on the east fence, 3 patrols near the central tower, she whispered. "We move low, break at the trench, flank left to the blind zone." Finch muttered. "We should just go straight through, cut time." "That's how you get spotted," Kara replied. He snorted quietly. "You sure about that?" Kara looked at him through the green haze. "You doubt it? Stay behind me and find out." She moved first, crawling across the sand. The night was alive with quiet, the kind of silence that vibrates in your ears. Her gloves brushed grit and cold steel as they reached the wire. A faint buzz came from her comm. The commander's voice, distant but deliberate. "Timer's running." Kara sliced through the fence. The team followed, though their breathing came heavier. Inside, the compound's floodlights flickered like heartbeat monitors. Figures moved in the distance, training dummies rigged with heat sensors. Each would flash red if tagged. Kara raised her rifle, whispering, "Target sighted." 200 meters, Finch whispered back. "You can't hit that clean from here. Watch." Her first shot cracked softly, a burst of compressed air and light. The sensor flared red. Second shot. Another flash, the team froze. Finch cursed under his breath. Kara lowered her rifle. 2 hostiles down, move. They advanced through the trenches, shadows flickering across their goggles. The adrenaline began to blur seconds. A spotlight flared suddenly. Motion sensor triggered. The compound lit up like an alarm. "Contact!" All shouted, ducking low. Kara didn't hesitate. "Left flank cover! Finch, take overwatch!" The sound of training fire filled the night. Bursts of air rounds, impact alarms. Sensors vibrated against their armor, simulating the sting of close hits. Finch swore. "They've got range on us." Kara rolled behind cover, exhaled once, and peeked over the trench wall. The training dummies had repositioned, the simulation AI adjusting tactics. She had 5 seconds, maybe less. She steadied her rifle on a broken cinder block. One breath. One shot. The reticle hovered. Crack. The central tower sensor flared red. The simulated lookout neutralized. She fired again. The left patrol dropped. Hall blinked, stunned. "How? Move!" she barked. They sprinted through the breach, cutting toward the extraction point. The compound alarms blared in simulated chaos, red lights spinning across their faces. Finch stumbled at the last turn, the sensor on his vest flashing red. "Hit!" he shouted. "Keep moving!" Kara yelled. They crossed the final gate together, and the buzzer sounded. Mission time, 18 minutes, 42 seconds. The commander's voice came through the radio, calm but unreadable. "All targets neutralized." "Extraction successful," Kara exhaled, lowering her rifle. Her gloves trembled slightly from adrenaline. When they removed their helmets, Finch looked at her, chest still heaving. "You could have left me when I went down." She met his gaze. "That's not how teams work." For a moment he said nothing. Then reluctantly he nodded. "You're not what I expected." Kara gave a faint, tired smile. "No one ever is." From the observation deck, the commander watched in silence. His hand rested on the railing, eyes following her through the floodlight haze. He spoke softly to himself, barely audible under the wind. Instinct and patience. Just like she said, Kara didn't hear it. She was already walking toward the barracks, rifle slung across her shoulder, her breath steady again. Another test passed, another silence earned. But she knew it wouldn't be the last. Not with eyes still watching. Not in a world that needed proof twice. The night had turned colder, sharper, the kind of desert chill that slipped beneath the skin and lingered in the bones. The second phase of the evaluation began without ceremony. The commander's voice came through the radio just after midnight, low and clipped. New parameters. Hostage simulation. No lights, limited visibility. Targets are live action. They move, they react. Your team leads extraction. Fail the objective, you're all out. Kara acknowledged the order. "Copy, sir." Finch sighed over the comm. "Another night, another miracle to chase." Hall muttered, "Hope the miracle comes with night vision this time." Kara ignored them, crouched in the sand near the start line. She tightened her gloves, her rifle across her knees. The darkness in front of her was thick, textured, a black ocean waiting for movement. "Remember," she whispered, "we move silent, 2 by 2. Watch your arcs, call your visuals. We get in, pull the hostage, get out clean." The team nodded reluctantly, the kind of obedience born of fatigue, not faith. Then the timer clicked on. They moved through the mock village in silence. The structures were ghostly outlines under the half-moon, empty shells of plywood, painted to resemble stone. The air smelled faintly of oil and old smoke. Kara's boots barely made a sound. Every step was measured. Every glance, a calculation. She scanned corners, checked her 6, signaled silently with her hand. The others followed, but distance lingered between them. Not in formation, but in trust. At the central building, she held up a fist. "Visual," she whispered. Through the cracked doorway, a faint light flickered. A figure moved inside. The hostage, wearing simulation gear. 2 guards paced beside him, rifles cradled. Kara's breath slowed. "Finch, take the right side window." "Hall on me." "We breach on 3. Finch grunted acknowledgement. His silhouette shifted toward position. 1, 2. Crack! A shot split the silence before she could say 3. Dust puffed from the wall beside the doorway. Off target. Who fired? Kara hissed. No answer. The building erupted in simulated chaos. Alarms blared, red strobes flashing across the desert. The guards reacted instantly, training dummies raising rifles with mechanical precision. "Contact front." Hall shouted, diving for cover. "Finch, what the hell was that?" Kara barked into her mic. "It was a misfire." "I take move." Kara rolled through the doorway as simulated rounds tore the air around her. She took out 1 guard, then the second, but the delay had cost them. The hostage was down, sensor flashing red. "Objective failed," came the commander's voice through the comm. "Flat cold." Team returned to base. The lights went out. The desert fell silent again. Back at the range, the air felt heavier. The team stood in a loose line as the commander approached, clipboard under his arm. His boots crunched on the gravel, slow, deliberate. He stopped in front of Kara. "You had command." "Yes, sir, and you lost the hostage." "Yes, sir." He nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Do you know why?" Kara's voice was level. "A premature discharge, sir." Finch misfired. The commander's eyes didn't leave hers. "Leadership isn't about excuses. It's about control. If your men can't follow you, that's on you." The words landed like blows, not loud, not cruel, just heavy with finality. Kara's jaw tightened. She said nothing. Finch glanced at her from the side, guilt flickering briefly in his eyes. But he didn't speak up. None of them did. The commander turned away. "Dismissed." They scattered, muttering to each other as they walked off. Hall kicked at the sand. Finch stayed behind for a moment, hesitating. "I didn't mean to." She cut him off quietly. "It doesn't matter." He swallowed. "I should have owned it." She looked at him, calm but distant. "Owning it doesn't fix it." He nodded, shame heavy in his voice. "Still, sorry." She just gave a faint nod and turned toward the dark edge of the camp. Later that night, long after the others had fallen asleep, Kara sat by a small campfire outside the barracks. The flames flickered softly, painting shadows across her face. The wind carried faint traces of burnt sand and gun oil. Her rifle lay across her knees again, stripped down to its pieces. She wasn't cleaning it this time, just checking it. Touching it. The act grounded her. The sound of the others' quiet breathing drifted from nearby tents, distant, human, fragile. Her hands were steady, but her thoughts weren't. Maybe he's right. Leadership wasn't marksmanship. It wasn't wind calls or breath control. It was something messier, something that couldn't be measured by perfect aim. The commander's voice echoed again in her head. "If your men can't follow you, that's on you." She hated how it lingered. The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the air. She reached for her scope, holding it up to the firelight, adjusting the focus rings slowly. The glass caught the flames and bent them into shapes. Her father's voice came back, uninvited, as it always did in the quiet. "Patience is precision, but endurance is the soul of it," she whispered softly to the fire, to herself, maybe to him. "Respect isn't earned by perfection. It's earned by endurance." The desert wind sighed through the camp, lifting a few sparks into the night. They drifted upward, vanishing into the black sky, little fragments of heat disappearing into cold air. Kara watched them until the fire burned low. Then she reached for her rifle, reassembled it piece by piece. Tomorrow would bring another test, another chance to prove the same thing she'd already proven a dozen times. But for now, she sat still, silent, waiting for the world to stop moving again. The desert echoed faintly in the distance. A single training shot fired somewhere downrange. Then another, then silence. Kara smiled faintly. "Keep shooting," she murmured. "That's how you learn to endure." And the fire died quietly beside her. The desert was already burning red before the sun cleared the horizon. A thin mist of dust hung over the range, glowing like embers in the early light. The wind carried that dry metallic scent of ammunition and sweat, the smell that always came before a live fire drill. "Positions." The range officer's voice echoed across the dunes, cutting through the hum of generators and the distant rattle of choppers. Lieutenant Kara Miles stepped forward with her rifle slung low across her chest. Visor down, boots sinking slightly into the loose sand. Around her, the team moved with jittery purpose, checking mags, wiping sweat, adjusting comms. They looked focused, but beneath the helmets, she could feel it, doubt still breathing between them like static. The commander stood on the observation platform, arms folded, a figure carved against the rising sun. His shadow stretched long across the training field. "Red sky drill," he called out through the loudspeaker. "Simulated chaos. Real ammo. No second chances. You move as one or you fail as one." His voice carried finality, like scripture. Kara nodded once. "Copy that." She knelt beside a crate, opening her pack with deliberate calm. Inside, extra mags, optics cloth, water canteen, field gloves. Each piece of gear had its place. Each motion had its reason. Her heartbeat stayed slow, controlled. Then came the signal. A single horn blast rolling through the desert. Targets appeared from the mist, mechanical silhouettes rising from the sand. Some stationary, others on rails, moving in erratic bursts. Drones buzzed overhead, projecting digital enemies on the HUD visors. "Engage!" The first volley cracked through the air. The noise was thunderous, sharp, layered with echo. The sun flared across her visor, turning everything to crimson and glare. Kara dropped to one knee, exhaled slowly, and squeezed. Pop! The target 300 meters out dropped clean. Left flank, 2 more! She called. Finch moved, but late. His shot went wide, kicking dust into the air. "Recalibrate!" She snapped. He muttered something she couldn't hear. The comms were filled with overlapping shouts. Too many voices, not enough order. The air grew thick with heat and sound. Brass casings danced across the sand like sparks. Hall ducked behind a barrier, panting. "They're coming fast. Stay on your sector," Kara ordered. "You move. We break formation." Another target popped from the far ridge. She pivoted, adjusting wind offset by instinct. Her round hit center mass. The dummy fell backward, dust rising like smoke. From the platform, the commander watched, face expressionless behind dark glasses. He said nothing, only scribbled notes on a clipboard as the simulation unfolded. Kara didn't look his way, but she felt his presence like a weight pressing between her shoulders. Every motion she made was sharp, exact. Years of muscle memory wrapped in silence. But the team, they were fraying. Hall called for reload. Finch missed another mark. Someone stumbled into her line of fire, breaking the rhythm entirely. "Back! Stay in formation!" She barked, no response. Just noise? Gunfire, grunts, the hum of drones slicing through red air. She moved through them like a ghost, firing, repositioning, directing. But their panic spread faster than her control. A simulated explosion went off 20 meters ahead, flinging sand into a fiery haze. The blast wave rolled over them, hot and brutal. Kara hit the ground hard, eyes narrowed against the glare. Her ears rang, but her hands didn't hesitate. She reloaded, rolled, aimed, and fired again. 3 shots, 3 hits. When the dust settled, she was the only one still upright. "Cease fire!" The commander's voice boomed from above. The noise died. The drones retreated into the sky like vultures, dispersing. Smoke curled around the training field. The sun had risen fully now, bright and merciless. Kara stood there, rifle hanging from her shoulder, breathing steady but shallow. The rest of the team sat or knelt in the sand, exhausted, their faces streaked with dust and disbelief. The ground was littered with shells and scorched powder. The commander descended from the platform, his boots crunching slowly over the gravel. He stopped in front of her, studying the scene. "Accurate," he said finally. "Efficient." There was a pause. Then softer. "But a team doesn't survive on precision alone." She met his gaze, expression unreadable. "Understood, sir." He nodded once and walked past her, voice low as he spoke into his comm. "End simulation. Debrief in 15. The others began packing their rifles, muttering to each other under their breath. Some glanced her way, others avoided her entirely. Finch passed by without a word. Hall looked at her, as if wanting to say something, then just lowered his eyes. Kara stood motionless, the world around her settling into a muted hum. The red sky had begun to pale into orange, the desert heat already crawling up from the sand. A faint wind stirred, carrying the smell of burnt powder and steel. She looked down the range where the last targets had fallen. 3 perfect shots, aligned almost symmetrically. Even in failure, her precision was undeniable, but precision wasn't what they saw. To them, she was still the outlier, the one who hit every mark but stood alone after the smoke cleared. She exhaled slowly, pulling her helmet off. Her hair clung to her skin, damp with sweat and grit. The silence that followed was heavy, like a verdict. Kara slung her rifle across her back and walked toward the horizon, boots leaving clear prints in the sand. Behind her, the commander watched. Unreadable behind his glasses, the range was quiet again, just wind, dust, and a single figure walking away beneath the blood-red sky. And though no one said it aloud, Every man watching knew what they had just seen, a soldier who didn't miss, but couldn't belong. The red light in the operations tent blinked like a heartbeat. It was not the calm, practiced alert of training. This was raw, urgent, the kind of call sign that moved men from sleep to steel in a handful of breaths. Radios hissed with static. A map table glowed under a dozen fingers as the SEAL commander pulled up the satellite feed. "No drill," the commander said, voice flat. His face was lit by the screen, angular and severe. Around him, the room smelled of coffee gone cold and soldering heat. Officers leaned in. Everyone had weight behind their eyes. 3 high-value personnel, the intel officer announced. He pushed a file forward. 3 generals, diplomatic security detail compromised. It happened at the summit site. We have confirmation from local authorities and the embassy. Hostiles' exfil route is through the northern desert corridor. ETA 3 hours. He tapped the screen. A grainy video played for a second, frozen on the face of a man with a bandana covering his mouth. The words landed like stones. 3 generals. A summit meant negotiations, fragile lines between peace and collapse. The press would swarm. The political fallout could be immediate and global. We need to retrieve them, or neutralize the threat before they reach the corridor, the commander said. He looked around the table, reporting look to look, measuring faces. We are the only unit on standby with the insertion and extraction windows. This will be covert. Local forces are compromised. Rules are tight. Collateral is unacceptable, murmurs rose. Major Rennick's jaw worked. Sir, we can task the reconnaissance teams. We have long-range assets. He gestured at the screen, toward the northern corridor and the thin ribbon of road running between scrub and stone. We do not have time for recon missions to verify every cell, the commander replied. We have a window before the convoy reaches the route. We take it now or we wait and lose the chance. This is a direct order from higher up. He said the last word slowly, as if every syllable had been weighed. A younger officer scrolled through the roster. We have a full complement on the field, sir, but... He paused. We have a new transfer here, Lieutenant Kara Miles. Her evaluation just started. She's effective, sir, but her record is, well, complicated. Silence tightened. The tent felt smaller, the air thicker. Kara stood near the far wall, rifles slung against her shoulder, hands folded. She had been waiting for a worst case. This was it. Rennick's voice held concern. So, with respect, she was dismissed from the Corps, behavioral non-compliance. We do not know how she operates under political constraints. Risk could be elevated. The commander met Rennick's eyes. We have a bracket of time. We do not have the luxury of gold-plated confidence. We have to pick the team that will get the job done. If you have a better name, I will listen. His tone left no room for argument. Another voice higher up crackled in over the secure line. You are cleared. Discretion paramount. Proceed at your discretion. Recover the principals. No public engagement unless extraction fails. Kara watched the screen, the faces of the missing generals flickering in the satellite stills. She did not flinch. She was not a stranger to orders that split the heart from the mind. She had made choices before that carried consequences. She had lived with the weight. Rennick pushed again, softer this time. If we must move, we should use a team proven in coordinated rescues. This is not a solitary marksman operation. The commander looked at Kara. In the glow of the table, she looked composed. He let the silence stretch a second longer. Then deliberately he said, She is coming with us. A near mutter rose around the table. Sir, she showed exceptional long-range capability and tactical composure on the range, the commander said. We need that capability on this mission. We need someone who can take precise shots at distance, who can make them count. She is our last shot. He used the words as a hinge. There was a measure of finality to them that made the room shift. Rennick's face went pale for a heartbeat. We have senior officers who will object, sir. Sending an untested transfer into a live extraction will raise questions. Then we will answer them with success, the commander replied. We do not have time for consensus. We have time for action. Kara stepped forward then, not to argue, not to plead. I will do what is required, sir, she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. There was no hint of bravado, just a readiness that had been honed by loss and rehearsal. The commander looked at her, really looked, as if absorbing not just her words but the steadiness itself. "You will be embedded in Recon 2. You will have an overwatch role and a direct engagement role if the extraction is compromised. You follow orders from my lead. No unilateral action without command consent," she nodded. "Understood." The weight of the assignment settled on her shoulders like familiar gear. They moved quickly. Teams were briefed, weapons checked, vehicles fueled. Satellite windows carved out a narrow corridor of time. Communications were assigned, suppression plans drafted. Maps were traced with gloved fingers. The mission grid became a lattice of possible errors and calibrated solutions. Rennick lingered near Kara's elbow as she checked her rifle. "This is not about your shot," he said quietly. "It is about command structure." Kara tightened a strap. "Command structure will be respected," she said. "I know the difference. I also know what to do when the structure fails, those it is meant to protect." His eyes searched her face, maybe looking for defiance. He found only resolve. He gave a short nod, then walked away to finalize logistics. Outside the tent, the desert sky began to gray. Time pressed like a loaded magazine. The team assembled in silence, the gravity of the job compressing speech into focus. They did not yet trust her, but the commander had chosen. In that choice lay an implicit responsibility on everyone in the tent. As they mounted vehicles and tightened straps, Kara had one thought, clear and simple. Precision could save lives, but only if someone trusted the hand that delivered it. She would have to earn that trust in movement, not on a range. She would have to prove again that the shot was more than a miracle. It was a covenant. The convoy rolled out beneath a sky that held no promises. The clock on the dashboard ticked toward the corridor. Somewhere ahead, 3 lives hung in the balance, and the desert waited to see whether the men and women in the vehicles could bend time and fate long enough. The commander glanced at Kara one last time, voice barely audible over the engine hum. "We move now." "She's our last shot." She did not answer. She tightened her grip on the rifle and stared at the road ahead. The stakes had shifted from proving skill to preserving life. The silence in the vehicle was full of all that might be lost or saved in the coming hours. The helicopter blade beat the air like a giant heart. Cold desert wind flooded the cabin, carrying sand, oil, and the metallic scent of equipment. The night had given up its black. Dawn skinned the horizon into blue and grey. Shadows lay long and thin across the scrub. Kara's boots were braced against the floor. Her rifle rested between her knees, an extension of a steadying limb. The NVG tubes were up but dark. The pilot ran a steady hand across the collective. Outside the door, the world was a smear of movement. Inside, every man and woman breathed in time with the engine. "Recon 2, check comms," the commander said calmly through the earpiece. His voice was a flat line of authority. "Overwatch on my signal. Rules of engagement remain positive ID only." The team leader called out positions. Voices overlapped in efficient bursts. "We have air cover. LZ 90 meters west. Extraction at 15 minutes post-insertion. Keep noise discipline." Kara's POV narrowed into the scope of habit. The world became optics and numbers. Blade RPM, wind direction. Bearing to target. Elevation angles. She thumbed the safety off and then on. Routine. Focus. Through the open hatch, she watched the terrain roll away. The convoy track cut like a pale scar through scrub. The compound was a dark clustering of shapes near a dry wash. Satellite feed had painted it in pixels, but now it was raw and real. A compound with parapets, vehicles, tents, movement. 3 high-value targets inside, the intel officer whispered. Hostiles armed. Sniper positions reported on the east ridge. Kara's lip tightened. Snipers meant layered threat. Snipers meant time stretched into small incidents. She checked the wind through the open door. Cold air slapped her face, then spun and came back. The flags on the range had seemed tricky. This would be worse. "Approach vector in," the pilot said. "Hold low. Watch for small arms." They moved like a shadow, skimming the earth. The LZ marker burned red against the dawn. The hatch kicked open. One by one they passed out into noise and dust. The world descended into sharp angles and smell. Kara dropped, rolling into cover behind a dune. Sand sprayed, her lungs filled with grit. She wiped a spit of sand from her glove and checked the scope. Her spotter was in place 2 meters to her left, hands steady, eyes quick. "Overwatch established," he murmured. The first crack came from the ridge, a thin, bright strike that cut the air. Bullets bit into the dune in front of them, sending sand into the sky. Men cursed. Training protocols evaporated. This was real. The snipers had found them. "Contact east," Hall shouted. Voices snapped into sharp commands. "Return fire!" Suppressed their nests. Rounds stitched through the air. Gunfire and the whine of rotor wash overlapped into a new kind of chaos. The team moved under covering fire, bounding low between dunes, the world narrowing to the next piece of cover and the next breath. Kara's hands were cold, rigid under her gloves. Her breath was measured, the muscle memory of 1,000 drills. She flowed into the rhythm of combat. Scan, call, settle, squeeze. Windage adjustments, elevation, target lead on a moving figure. 1 per second, precision inside noise. Her spotter fed her range and wind. 400 meters left drift. 2 clicks. She adjusted 1,500 meters from the proving range, now traded for an enemy with a heartbeat. The reticle steadied over the seam of a rooftop. A flash of cloth moved. "Target profile. Positive ID, target 1, visual," she whispered. Her voice barely disturbed the static. The team leader cursed, then pressed forward under covering bursts. Vince lay down, suppressing fire, his rounds punching ragged holes in the far wall to deny sight lines. Men moved through the smoke of disturbed sand. A radio hissed with status updates. Extraction time marched down. Another crack from the ridge, closer this time. It thudded into the vehicle just past Kara's position. Metal screamed. An engine coughed. Someone screamed. The sound was inside her chest, sudden and sharp. Kara did what she had always done. She narrowed the world into the circle of the scope. The wind whispered across the reticle. The mirage of heat was gone, replaced with a clean, lethal clarity. She did the math without thinking. Bullet drop, drift, lead for a moving guard crossing a courtyard. She steadied, exhaled half and squeezed. The shot left clean. The hit was not cinematic. It was practical and precise. The guard stumbled, fell behind a wall, his weapon clattering. The spotter confirmed with a hard whisper, "Impact. Target neutralized." "Good," the team leader said. "Keep eyes on the ridge. They have elevation." Kara cycled the bolt. She did not look up to see the effect. There was no time for satisfaction. Someone called her designation over the net. A terse query about a secondary overwatch on the southern approach. She adjusted to the new sector without complaint. Chaos continued. A flurry of rifle fire forced them into a shallow trench. A grenade detonated beyond the low wall, throwing dirt into their faces. Communications went hot and static for a shallow moment. The commander's voice broke through, calm and cold. "Stay on mission. Hold your sectors. Extract when I give the nod." Kara felt the weight of that nod like gravity. She understood the calculus. One wrong shot, one wrong call, collateral political fallout. Private lives ended. The rules felt thinner now, but they were real. Every round had to count. "Sniper on the eastern promontory is tracking west to east," her spotter warned. "He's moving." She found the new angle, accounting for wind and elevation change. Her hands were steady. Her mind was crisp. She could hear the static in her ear, the ragged breaths of those beside her. She could hear the faint call of someone urging for extraction. The sun climbed. It cut a clean line across the compound. The snipers kept firing, but each crack fed into her rhythm. She set her crosshair on a high-ridge figure. The world behind the lens narrowed again to the small human detail of a sleeve and a rifle. 1 breath, 2, then squeeze. The report exceeded the morning noise. The bullet took its arc and found the mark. The shooter slumped. The chaos did not stop. It only changed shape. Men moved faster now. The team leader radioed, "Move! Extraction in 2 minutes! Push!" Kara secured her rifle for movement, then slung it back on. Her legs burned, but she felt no fear. There was only the task and the tiny, precise economy of motion it demanded. She moved with them, part of the machine. Not invisible, Not celebrated, necessary. Around her, men shouted and bled and kept going. Sirens of a different sort burned just beneath the surface. Screams and static, fear and focus. In the heat of that dawn, under the chattering blades and the cold wind, Kara found the place she had always known. She would find the angle and make the shot. She would do it without fanfare. She would do it to give others a chance to leave. The extraction point loomed, a pale line on the horizon. The clock was not hers. The mission was. She stepped forward into the chaos, the rifle again a steadying weight against her shoulder. They moved like a single organism toward the extraction point. Men ran low and fast between scrub and dust. Helicopters circled far above, their shadows scudding across the ground. The compound was a nest of noise and light. It had teeth. It had traps. It had a clock. Kara took position on the ridge, heart steady beneath the armored vest. Her spotter crouched beside her. Both of them were a study in quiet motion. Night vision lenses reflected the dawn like glass. Her rifle lay against the sand, bipod open, scope aligned with 1,000 practiced motions. Through the scope, the world tightened. The compound opened like a stage. Corners and roofs, shadows and movement. Men moved with the hurried certainty of the hunted. 3 figures stood together near the command tent. Tall men in dark coats, the generals. Screens in the field had shown only blurs. Now they were human, breathing, shifting weight from foot to foot. The intel feed painted a thin strip of certainty. Hostile escorts formed a triangle around them, weapons bristling. Snipers had already taken positions on the eastern ridgeline. Theirs was a layered battlefield. One mistake could cascade into catastrophe. Range to target 1, her spotter whispered. 600 meters. Range 2, 650. Range 3, 720. Wind is inconsistent. Variable gusts from the southwest at up to 20 knots. Thermals forming off the wash. Kara felt the words like weather across her skin. She adjusted the knobs on the scope, threaded the minute corrections into the glass. Elevation, windage. Coriolis was a thought that lived at the edge of calculation. Her breath slowed. The world reduced to the reticle and the pulse behind her ear. They were 30 seconds from extraction. Command had given them one chance to shape the outcome. The team leader radioed a soft status. The convoy was in motion. The enemy had eyes. The clock ticked. Target 1 is opening to move, her spotter said. Exposed for 3 seconds, 3 seconds. The number thudded in her chest like a metronome. 3 seconds, and then the window closed. The enemy would shift. The generals would be stepped behind armor. The chance would be gone. She checked the wind again. Flags flapped far below on service vehicles. Dust ghosts rose and fell with every gust. Each gust changed the math. Hold, she breathed. She counted the seconds inside her like beads. 1, 2. The world contracted to the feel of the pad beneath her cheek. She remembered her father's hand on her shoulder. Remembered that odd calm he taught her. Precision, he had said, lived in the waiting. A hiss came through the comm. Sniper East has been suppressed. Move on my mark. It was the commander. His voice was thin, with the kind of concentration that cannot be faked. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. The first figure shifted. He turned his shoulder and glanced toward the northern ridge as if sensing someone watching. Kara inhaled slowly. The breath filled her chest. She exhaled half, letting the sound leave her body. Her finger rested against the trigger. Her muscles were coiled but not tense. Her mind detached from the blood noise of fear. It was purely calculation now. The first shot cracked like a small hammer. The recoil kissed her cheek. The round left and became a promise cut against the wind. For a suspended beat, she watched the path through the scope. The impact bloomed on the first man. He stumbled, fell. The spotter confirmed with flat, factual tones. Impact. Target 1 neutralized. The window for the others had narrowed further. The enemy would react in milliseconds. The next 2 exposures were not simultaneous. They were seconds apart. Timing would be everything. Wind shifted. A gust rolled down the wash, colder and sharper than before. It tugged at the mirage. Kara twitched the windage dial 2 ticks, then 1. She moved with the machine of training and instincts. Target 2 stepped from cover to reposition. His profile was brief. 2 seconds. The world held tight. She settled the crosshair. The shot came. The sound of the rifle cut the dawn. Another impact bloomed. The second man fell, the exact center of his chest marked by a single hole. The compound spasmed. Shouts rose. Men dove. The escort formed tight, frantic rings around the fallen. The generals had become human bodies, collapsing into the long desert. Kara felt no triumph. There was only the next breath and the next calculation. The final target moved. He was turning to run toward a shadowed vehicle. His exposure was minimal. The chance for a clear shot was nearly gone. "Last one moves now," her spotter said, voice taut. She breathed in. She remembered the metronome of her father's advice. Wait for the world to stop. In that tiny stillness between two heartbeats, she found the gap. She fired. The recoil punched her shoulder. The last man crumpled. The 3 impacts came in an almost cruel rhythm, spaced like punctuation. 3 men down. 3 generals neutralized in under 10 seconds. 3 precise arcs through impossible wind. Silence crashed after the last clang. Even the wind seemed sheepish. The dust hung like a veil. Men shouted orders under their breath. Radios spat static and mangled phrases. The convoy cruise accelerated. Kara exhaled the breath she had been holding for what felt like hours. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were dry. She did not watch the fallen. She scanned for threats, and then for the extraction point. From the observation ridge, the commander lowered his binoculars slowly. He did not move quickly. His mouth parted, then closed. He lifted a hand to his face as if to feel what had happened. For a long second he uttered nothing. Then, barely audible over the wind and the radioed chaos, he whispered the words that had haunted the range months earlier. No one could hit that shot. The desert wind carried the sound of blades long before the helicopters appeared. It began as a faint tremor in the sand, a pulse that built with every heartbeat. The compound was still smoking, fragments of sound scattered through static. Shouts had turned to orders. The operation was over, but no one moved as if it was. Kara lay flat against the ridge for a moment longer, cheek still pressed to the rifle. Her scope caught the horizon, where the first helicopter crested the rising sun. The glare turned its metal skin gold. She blinked once, pulled away, and started breaking down her rifle with precise, unhurried motions. Every click, every twist was muscle memory, calm ritual after chaos. Her spotter exhaled sharply beside her. "You did it," he murmured, half in disbelief. Kara didn't answer. She wiped the dust from her hands, folded the bipod, and slung the rifle over her shoulder. Below them, the retrieval teams moved like clockwork, securing the fallen, gathering intelligence, pulling survivors out from the wreckage. The dawn had burned away the night's red haze. The air smelled of heat and cordite. When they reached the landing zone, the rotors were whipping sand into halos. The noise was deafening. Kara ducked low, gripping her gear, eyes narrowed against the blast. The commander stood near the center of the zone, silhouette outlined by swirling grit. He watched her approach without expression. She stopped a few feet away. Their eyes met through the chaos. For a long second, the rest of the world blurred behind them. Men shouting, wind tearing at their clothes, the metallic thunder of engines. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, slow, respectful, the kind of nod that didn't need words. Kara gave a small, silent acknowledgement in return. Then she turned toward the chopper. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with tension. Soldiers sat buckled in, faces drawn and hollow from adrenaline. Nobody spoke at first. The rhythmic thump of the blades filled the space like a heartbeat. Kara took the last seat by the door, rifle across her lap. She stared out through the open hatch at the shrinking compound. A tiny scar in the sand now. A young corporal across from her glanced up, hesitant. "Ma'am, those shots, I didn't think anyone could—" He trailed off, searching for words that didn't sound like awe. Kara looked at him, her face unreadable behind the dust and shadows. "It was the wind," she said simply. "I just read it right." The others exchanged glances. One by one they began to nod, quietly at first, then with a kind of understanding that only comes after fire. Respect had taken root, subtle and genuine. Outside, the desert stretched endless and silent. The helicopters cut across it like silver knives. Kara leaned back, closing her eyes for the first time since the mission began. The hum of the engines became a lullaby of exhaustion. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to breathe without purpose. Her fingers traced the side of the rifle, feeling the small etched mark her father had carved years ago. A simple P. Precision, patience, the words that had carried her through every impossible moment. The commander stepped into the cabin mid-flight. Dust still clung to his uniform. He didn't sit. He stood in the doorway, gripping the frame, looking out at the horizon. For several minutes he said nothing. Then, just before turning away, he spoke in a voice that barely carried over the rotors. "Good work, Lieutenant." It was more than praise. It was admission, recognition, forgiveness for every doubt that had lingered in his eyes before. Kara nodded, still looking out the door. "Thank you, sir." He gave a faint smile, the kind only soldiers exchange after surviving something that could have gone either way, and moved to the front of the cabin. The rest of the ride passed in reverent silence. The sun rose higher, painting the dunes in pale gold. Below them, shadows stretched long and thin across the sand, like memories of what they'd left behind. When they finally reached the base, the helicopters settled onto the tarmac with heavy grace. Engines wound down. The roar faded to a whisper. Men stepped out slowly, their movements heavy with fatigue. Kara was the last to disembark. She paused at the open hatch, looking back across the empty desert. Somewhere out there lay the ridge where she had taken the impossible shot. The place where doubt had turned to proof. She adjusted her cap against the wind and stepped down. The ground felt solid, familiar. Around her, the team gathered, waiting for debrief. The commander passed by, offering another quiet nod, the second and final confirmation that she belonged here. There was no applause, no celebration, only the sound of boots on gravel and the faint hum of distant engines cooling in the morning heat. Kara walked past the hangar toward the barracks, rifle in hand. The sun glared against her back, and the wind carried the faint echo of her father's voice. Precision is patience. The music that would score this moment, if life had a soundtrack, would be slow and reverent, low strings, a single heartbeat drum beneath it, no triumph, only quiet honor. The command tent was a pocket of shade against the endless glare of the Nevada sun. Inside, the air hummed with the low buzz of radios and the muted shuffle of boots. Maps spread across tables, dotted with fresh pins and red markings, the remnants of a mission that had already begun to turn into legend. Kara stood just inside the entrance, helmet tucked beneath one arm. The flap of the tent whispered in the wind behind her, letting in slivers of harsh daylight. Around the table, a circle of brass gathered, men and women of rank, polished uniforms gleaming under fluorescent light. Their faces showed exhaustion, relief, and something else. Respect measured, earned, but rarely given. 3 generals stood before her, the same men she had seen through her scope hours earlier, targets once, now survivors. Their posture carried weight, but their eyes carried gratitude. One of them, General Hargrove, stepped forward. His handshake was firm, his gaze steady. "Lieutenant Miles," he said, voice low but resonant, "you saved more than lives today. You saved the line of command itself." Kara nodded once, her expression composed. "Just did what was required, sir." Another general smiled faintly. "Required?" He gestured toward the table, where satellite stills of the operation lay printed. "That was not required. That was extraordinary." Her response was quiet, almost lost beneath the soft whir of the air conditioner. "Sometimes the line between the two is thin, sir." Around them, the tent filled with murmurs of agreement. The team members who had flown back with her stood near the side, exhausted, dusty but proud. Their earlier skepticism had melted into quiet admiration. They didn't cheer. They didn't need to. Every glance between them said what words couldn't. The SEAL commander entered last. His presence carried its usual gravity, composed, sharp, no wasted movement. He stopped a few feet from Kara, his boots leaving faint prints in the sand-dusted floor. The chatter fell away. He regarded her for a long moment, eyes narrowing just slightly, as if seeing her for the first time. Then he spoke, his tone even but softer than usual. "You were right," he said. "No one could, except you." The room went still. Kara met his gaze. The edges of her lips curved into the faintest smile, not of pride, but of peace. "I just did my job, Commander." The simplicity of it settled over the tent like a steady heartbeat. A few officers nodded. The commander exhaled through his nose, a sound that might have been a chuckle if not for the weight of the moment. Outside, the distant thrum of helicopters carried across the desert, fading slowly as they disappeared over the horizon. Somewhere beyond the tent, the media crews were gathering, reporters, cameras, eager to frame a story of precision and heroism. The first major rescue mission completed flawlessly. They wanted a name, a face, a quote, but Kara remained still. An aide stepped in, tablet in hand. "Lieutenant Miles, the press is requesting a statement. The Pentagon's already preparing a feature on the mission." She raised a hand gently, cutting him off. "Respectfully, I'll pass." The aide hesitated. "Ma'am, they're calling it one of the cleanest precision extractions in modern ops. People will want to hear, then let them hear from the team," Kara replied. Her tone was calm, not defensive. "They did the work. I was just where I needed to be." Her words carried no false humility. They were matter of fact, grounded in the discipline she lived by. The commander watched her for a long moment, then nodded once, a gesture of approval more meaningful than any medal. The debrief continued. Tactical review, coordinates, after-action reports. The room filled with talk of logistics and commendations. Kara took her seat at the edge of the table, contributing only when asked. Her answers were concise, factual. No embellishment, no drama. When the meeting concluded, officers rose one by one, shaking hands, exchanging quiet thanks. The commander lingered near the back, observing her as she gathered her gear. "You'll be getting your transfer soon," he said, voice low. "Advanced Marksman Division wants you in training oversight." Kara looked up, expression unreadable. "You sure that's wise, sir? Some of your men still think it was luck." He studied her for a long second. "Luck doesn't strike 3 times in the same breath." She allowed herself a small, almost invisible smile. "No, sir, it doesn't." He turned toward the tent flap but paused. "For what it's worth, Miles, I doubted you once. I won't make that mistake again." "Understood, Commander," she said quietly. He nodded once, then stepped into the sunlight. The flap closed behind him, leaving her alone in the cool hum of the tent. Kara stood there for a while, staring at the operations map still pinned to the table. 3 small red dots marked the targets she'd eliminated. Around them, the faint outlines of topography and wind vectors, the language of precision. She reached out, placed 2 fingers on the map, and drew a line connecting the dots. Her motion was slow, almost reverent. It wasn't pride she felt, it was closure. From outside came the muffled noise of reporters, cameras flashing, voices calling names. The world wanted a hero, but the tent was quiet, and inside that quiet, Kara found what she had come for all along, respect that didn't need to be spoken. She slipped her helmet under her arm again, took one last look at the map, and whispered to no one in particular. It was never about hitting the shot. It was about proving I could aim true. Then she walked out into the bright, unforgiving sunlight, a figure cut from silence and discipline, disappearing into the heat shimmer of her own making. Night came slow over the desert, heavy with clouds that had not been seen in weeks. The heat broke with the first low rumble of thunder, a deep tremor that rolled across the barracks like memory. The air smelled of dust, iron, and coming rain. Kara sat beneath the overhang of the training shed, her rifle laid out in front of her on an oiled cloth. The rain began as a whisper against the tin roof, then a steady curtain. For the first time in months, the desert breathed. She moved with deliberate calm, disassembling the rifle piece by piece. Bolt, scope, barrel, each part set aside in perfect order. Her hands were sure, unhurried. It was a ritual she'd performed 1,000 times. But tonight it carried something different, something final, Drops of rain slipped from the roof and tapped against the metal casing, leaving small, darkened spots that spread like ink. Kara reached for a cloth and began to clean, slow, circular motions that caught the reflection of the overhead bulb. Every motion was an act of reverence, of release. Outside, the runway lights blinked faintly through the haze. The rest of the base was quiet. Soldiers asleep, generators humming, radios silent. Only the rain spoke now, soft and steady. As she lifted the scope, her mind slipped backward to a porch in rural Montana where the sound of rain had once been her lullaby. Her father sat beside her, older, patient, cleaning his old Winchester as the thunder rolled in the distance. "Patience makes precision," his voice said, not remembered, but heard, clear and warm. "Anybody can pull a trigger, Kara, but only the calm ones hit what matters." The words overlapped with the rhythm of the rain. She could almost see him again, the worn flannel shirt, the calloused hands, the way he would tilt his head slightly when he spoke, as if measuring the truth of every sentence. Back then, she had been too young to understand what he meant. She thought precision was about control, about power. It wasn't. It was about peace, about waiting for the world to settle before acting. Now, years and miles away, she understood. She ran the cloth along the length of the barrel, eyes tracing the faint marks etched into the steel. There was the small P her father had carved when he gave it to her before she enlisted. The letter caught a glimmer of light, glowing softly beneath the moisture. Kara smiled faintly. The rain thickened, hammering the roof in muted rhythm. She set down the rifle, leaned back against the bench and closed her eyes. The sound carried her somewhere else. The proving range, the mission, the impossible shot. All of it played in her mind not as battle, but as sound. Wind, breath, silence, release. The moments between, she realized she wasn't replaying them out of pride, but out of gratitude. Every failure, every doubt, every whispered "she can't" had led her here, to a quiet place where she no longer needed to prove anything. Lightning flashed beyond the horizon, lighting the wet sand like glass. The rain spilled from the edge of the roof, and for the first time, Kara let it fall on her face. The drops were cold, clean and real. Her uniform darkened, her hair clung to her temples. She didn't move. She just sat there, letting the water trace away the salt and dust of months in the field. It was not a baptism. It was release, the quiet washing away of everything she had carried too long. Inside her chest, a calm spread, not triumph, not sorrow, but something simpler, acceptance. She picked up the rifle again, now gleaming wet under the dim light. She reassembled it slowly, each click and turn echoing in the quiet. When she finished, she laid her hand on it one last time, fingers resting on the carved P. "Thanks, Dad," she whispered. The words drifted into the rain, carried off into the night. From across the field, the faint light of the command building glowed through the storm. A figure stood briefly in the doorway, the commander watching. He didn't call out, didn't approach. He just watched her there in the rain, alone but unbroken, and then turned back inside. The camera, if this were a film, would linger on Kara's face. The rain streaking down, the faint reflection of lightning in her eyes. The rifle gleaming beside her like a memory finally put to rest. She stood, slung it over her shoulder, and stepped out from under the roof. The rain hit her full now, soaking her through, but she didn't flinch. She walked slowly across the open ground toward the barracks, each step deliberate, dignified. Above her, thunder rolled again, low, deep, and distant. It sounded almost like applause, but quieter. By the time she reached her door, the storm had softened to a drizzle. The desert smelled new. Kara paused, looked back at the training shed where her rifle rested, and smiled, small, genuine, and content. For the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders was gone. Inside, she turned off the light. The rain kept falling, steady and endless, cleansing everything it touched. Morning came grey and quiet, the kind that made the desert look almost gentle. The rain had stopped some time before dawn, leaving shallow puddles and the scent of wet sand hanging in the air. The base stirred slowly, distant engines, boots against gravel, the low hum of generators warming to life. Kara sat at the small metal desk in her quarters, a mug of black coffee steaming beside a neatly folded stack of reports. The light was soft through the narrow window, a muted gold reflecting off the damp ground outside. Everything felt cleaner, sharper, lighter. A knock broke the stillness. "Come in," she said, not looking up. A young courier stepped through the doorway, rain-darkened uniform still drying at the shoulders. He carried a sealed brown envelope with the insignia of command stamped across it. "Orders for you, Lieutenant Miles," he said formally, extending it toward her. She took the envelope, nodded, and waited until the door shut behind him before opening it. The seal cracked with a soft tear. Inside was a single sheet, typed and signed at the bottom in the familiar hand of her commander. To Lieutenant Kara Miles. From Command Division. Naval Special Warfare Training Unit effective immediately. You are reassigned to Advanced Marksman Training Command, Coronado Base. Your duty will be to oversee and train new candidates in precision engagement, situational control, and operational patience. Your experience and record have demonstrated exceptional leadership potential. We believe you can help shape the next generation. Commander R.H. Dalton. Kara read it twice, then a third time. Her fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the page, leaving faint creases in the paper. For a long moment, she didn't move. The room was still, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Slow, patient, inevitable. Training command. Of all the paths she'd imagined, she hadn't expected this one. The missions had been her life. The wind, the dust, the silence between shots. Out there, she had known her place. It was simple. The crosshairs never lied, but now, the thought of trading her rifle for a roster, of swapping silence for instruction, stirred something uncertain inside her. She set the letter down and leaned back in her chair. The coffee had gone cold. She picked it up anyway, holding it between both hands as her gaze drifted to the window. Outside, the rainwater shimmered in small, perfect circles with every breeze. A few soldiers crossed the yard, their laughter muffled by distance. The world moved on, as it always did. Her mind wandered back to her father again, to his voice that seemed to rise from the memory of the storm. Patience isn't just about waiting. Kara, it's about teaching others how to see the world slow down. She smiled faintly at that. He'd been a teacher once before the army. She'd never thought much of it back then. But now the words felt heavier, truer. Could she really do it? Pass on what she'd learned, not from manuals or drills, but from surviving, from failing, from being doubted, from hitting the impossible shot. Her reflection caught in the window pane. The same calm eyes that once stared through a scope, now staring at a future that didn't need one. There was a knock again. Softer this time, it was the commander. He stepped in quietly, hat tucked under one arm. "Got your orders, I see," Kara nodded. "Yes, sir." He leaned against the doorframe. "They wanted my recommendation. I gave it." She looked at him. "Why me?" "Because you know what they'll never find in a manual," he said. "You know what doubt feels like, what silence sounds like before a trigger pull. They'll need that. They'll need you." She said nothing for a while. The quiet between them was comfortable now. No tension, no weight. Just understanding. Finally, she nodded. "Training command, then." He smiled faintly. "That's right. You'll do fine." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "The next generation won't know your name, Miles, but they'll carry your steadiness in their hands. That's the kind of legacy that lasts." She exhaled slowly. "Maybe that's how it should be." He nodded once and stepped out, the sound of his boots fading down the hall. Kara sat there a long time, the letter still open in front of her. She looked at it again, not as an ending, but as a bridge. Her voice, barely above a whisper, filled the small room. "The next shot won't be mine," she said. "It'll belong to whoever I train." She folded the letter neatly and placed it inside her journal, the same one she used to track wind notes and elevation charts. The pages smelled faintly of oil and rain. Then she stood, stretched her shoulders, and glanced once more toward the sky. The clouds were breaking apart, letting streaks of sunlight pierce through. The air shimmered over the desert's wet skin. Kara holstered her sidearm, straightened her uniform, and picked up her bag. There was no ceremony, no farewell. Just another mission waiting, quieter but no less vital. As she stepped out into the courtyard, the sun caught her face. Somewhere far off, a training rifle cracked, one clean report echoing across the base. Kara paused, listening. Then she smiled, faint but certain, and whispered, "Good shot." The camera would hold there, her figure framed against the clearing sky, walking toward a future she'd once thought she didn't belong to. From outcast to mentor, from silence to legacy, and for the first time, the world around her felt exactly still enough to breathe. The sun rose slow and deliberate over the Nevada horizon, washing the desert in a soft gold that shimmered across the sand. The range was quiet, not empty but reverent. Wind swept through the flagpoles, tugging lightly at the edges of the American flag, and the faint metallic scent of gun oil hung in the air. Kara Miles stood where the SEAL commander once had, boots pressed into the same gravel, eyes scanning the same endless stretch of range. But everything felt different now. The silence didn't press against her anymore. It rested gently like an old friend. Before her stood a line of new recruits. Young faces, sharp uniforms, restless eyes trying to mask their nerves. Some had that spark, the look of people who believed they already knew what precision meant. Others were quieter, unsure, scanning the horizon like it held the answers. Kara watched them all for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was calm, clear, and grounded, not commanding but steady, like the hum of the earth beneath their boots. 1,500 meters, she said, nodding toward the distant targets. Triple lineup. Crosswind variable at 12 knots shifting. A few recruits exchanged nervous glances. One whispered under his breath, "No one can hit that." Kara smiled faintly. "I've heard that before," she said. She walked slowly down the line, inspecting each rifle, adjusting postures, steadying hands. Her movements were quiet, deliberate, patient. Every correction came with a reason, every glance a lesson. Precision, she said softly, isn't about hitting a target. It's about understanding everything between you and it, the wind, the distance, your heartbeat. A young woman in the line asked, "Ma'am, is it true what they say, that you once hit 3 targets at this range, in one breath?" Kara paused, her eyes on the horizon. For a moment the past flickered through her mind, the dust, the wind, the ringing silence after the final shot. She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, it was quiet enough that the wind almost carried it away. "No one could hit that shot," she said, her gaze steady. "Until someone did." The recruits fell silent. Even the air seemed to still for a heartbeat. Then she gestured toward the shooting line. "Set positions," she ordered. They moved quickly, adjusting scopes and settling into prone stances. The rhythmic click of bolts echoed like a slow heartbeat across the sand. Kara stood behind them, watching. Not for flaws, but for focus. The first recruit to fire was a tall boy from Texas, his hands trembling slightly as he peered through the scope. The wind shifted again, tugging at his sleeve. "Breathe," Kara said gently. "Let the world slow down before you pull." He inhaled. Time seemed to stretch thin, the kind of stillness only snipers ever truly understood. Then the shot broke the air, sharp, clean echoing across the desert. The bullet struck just off center, kicking up dust near the edge of the target. The recruits murmured. The boy cursed softly. Kara knelt beside him, calm. "You missed the center," she said. "But you hit the wind." He frowned, confused. She smiled. "The wind will move you before doubt ever does." "Adjust again," he nodded. The second shot hit clean, dead center. The line erupted in quiet awe. Kara said nothing, only nodded once. She moved to the next recruit and the next, her voice steady, her guidance simple. Every correction carried the echo of her father's words. "Patience makes precision." Hours passed like minutes. The morning sun climbed higher, the air warming, the shimmer of heat beginning to rise from the sand. The smell of gunpowder and sweat filled the stillness, and somewhere in that golden light, the recruits began to understand what she was teaching. Not just how to shoot, but how to see. When the final target fell, Kara called ceasefire. The range was littered with the faint plumes of dust and the metallic scent of spent rounds. She walked forward, boots crunching on gravel, and turned back toward them. They stood at attention, rifles slung, eyes wide with something new, respect maybe, or realization. She looked at them quietly. "You came here to learn how to make a shot. What you're really learning," she said, "is how to wait for one." She let that hang in the air a moment before continuing. "One day, you'll take a shot that no one thinks is possible. Maybe it's not a bullet. Maybe it's a choice, a command, or a moment when everything is on the line. When that happens, remember this." She lifted her gaze toward the horizon, where the sunlight cut sharp through the dust. "Heroism isn't about glory," she said softly. "It's about discipline and legacy." The wind rose, carrying her words out across the desert. The recruits stood silent, absorbing every syllable. Then she turned toward the first firing position again, a young woman settling behind her rifle, eyes calm and certain. Kara stopped beside her, leaned close and said quietly, "You've got this." "Take your time," the girl inhaled. The sound of her breath mirrored Kara's own years ago, the same stillness, the same impossible distance, the same hope. The trigger clicked. A single shot echoed across the range. "Perfect." Kara smiled faintly, the sunrise reflecting in her eyes. She straightened, hands behind her back, and watched the recruits gather their gear, the sound of their laughter rising like a soft rhythm against the morning wind. As the camera panned wide, the range stretching endless and golden, Kara's voice carried as the final narration. "You don't chase the impossible. You prepare for it. You don't seek respect. You earn it, one steady breath at a time, because every legend begins with a single shot and ends with the will to teach someone else how to take it." The frame lingered on her silhouette, still proud and peaceful, as the music swelled low and solemn. The flag rippled in the wind behind her. The world was quiet once more.